verb, haya. Let there be lights, let it be, let it appear. Let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark the seasons and days and years. And why this is important is because you need the visibility of the sun, moon, and stars in order to get advanced life on the planet. They need to regulate their biological clocks. So here's Moses some 3,500 years ago, accurately describing a very significant event in the Earth's history. When it goes from basically, so in day one, it goes from opaque to translucent, and then translucent to transparent in day 4. So it goes from completely dark to now by day 4, you have at least the occasional appearance of the sun, moon, and stars, able to get advanced life on the planet. You can go to the next slide. So let's take a look at the Genesis creation order, understanding the proper frame of reference with the Spirit of God hovering on the surface of the deep. And first off, the opening statement, God creates the entire physical universe. The word, the Hebrew, shamayen eretz, is a compound noun. And when those two are linked together, it's always describing the entire physical universe. Whereas shamayen, which is heavens, would have 3 different meanings, which is the sky would be one definition, the physical universe would be the second definition, and the third would be the place where God dwells. Eretz would have at least 4 different definitions. It could be the earth, planet Earth, it could be the soil, it could be the agricultural land, it can be any place on the ground. So, but when combined together, Shammai and Eretz, it means the entire physical universe. So God's making that statement in Genesis 1. And then the initial conditions are the earth is unfit for life, it's void of life, it's dark, as we just described, and completely covered with water. Now here's something right away we can put to the test. Now when our founder of Reasons to Believe, Hugh Ross, back when he first read the Bible, all the textbooks at this time said the earth always had continents. That was the belief back 40 plus years ago. They didn't have any explanation why, but that was the generally held view. But that was one of the tests that he put to it was, with further evidence, we'll find that the earth at one point was virtually entirely covered with water. And now, of course, if you're familiar with the evidence, the earth was completely covered with water. As a matter of fact, most planets will start in that manner. Water is a fairly abundant element. So the earth was completely covered with water, and then God, through miraculous intervention, had the continent formation take place over Earth's history. So we have the initial conditions. So what do we have happen? Day 1, light appears, and again it's haya on the Earth's surface. The sky is transformed. Day 2, God establishes a stable water cycle. Day 3, the continent formation appears, as we described just a second ago, and then the vegetation of the land is brought forth. This, of all the verbs used in Genesis 1, gives the most possibility for some sort of natural process. Doesn't mean evolution, but it is describing a natural process of the earth bringing forth the vegetation. Day 4 now is we see the objects responsible for the light. So we're seeing the sun, moon, and stars for the first time. They were there back in the beginning, or early in Earth's history, but they're now appearing for the first time here on day 4. And by the way, the objects are becoming visible, the objects he had already made. And day 5, now is the second time we see the verb bara used. He creates the large sea creatures. And these are also the soulish animals, the birds and sea mammals. And when I speak of soulish animals, and the Bible speaks of them, they're called the nephesh. These are animals that interact with each other and their environment and humans through mind, will, and emotion. So these are typically the creatures we make pets out of. We typically don't, I don't say some people don't, but we typically don't make pets out of snakes. But puppies we do. God has endowed them with a special feature so they can build emotional attachments to human beings. So I would say dinosaurs did not fit into the nephesh. There might be some debate on that. I think they would emotionally be attached to you as food, many of them, but probably not as, they probably would make great pets except on the Flintstones. So now we get to day 6 is the making, and now the verb here is asa, which is yasa and asa, manufacture of land mammals, wild animals, livestock, and rodents. Again, these are specific names. These are all birds and mammals. When you hear the creeping things in the ground, these are a lot of people thought they were talking about insects. I don't believe they're talking about insects here. They're part of the nephesh, the soulless creatures. They're probably talking about short-legged quadrupeds, like rodents, for example. And here's a book, if you're really interested in the animal kingdom and how all this fits, this is a great new book out, which is Hidden Treasures in the Book of Job. The next slide, please. So now we get to the really important part of the creation week, is Genesis day 6 and 7. God makes physical life. Now, this is the latter part of day 6. God makes physical man. What's interesting is he uses 2 verbs here. He makes physical man, asa, and creates spiritual man in his image, bara. It's very interesting that the 2 verbs are used. So what's the asa part? The asa part, which is the manufacture, is our body structure. Our body structure was not radically new. There were similar creatures that existed on the planet that had bones, tissue, skeleton, flesh, all those things. But what's radically new, bara, is that God made man in his image, his likeness. Spirit being, Adam. That is radically new. And no other creature that has appeared on the planet can show any evidence of ever experiencing or exhibiting spirit expression. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But so this is radically new, created bara, man in his image, his likeness. And in day 7, God ceases from his creative activities. In the closing summary in Genesis 2:4, these are, and this is this is how it would be word-to-word translation. These are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created in the day singular of their making. It's a summary statement. That's probably a better ending for Genesis 1. As most of you know, the chapters and verses in the Bible were not divinely inspired. They were very good and helpful and best guesses, but this is probably a better proper ending. Some argue even halfway between Genesis 2:4 is a proper ending to Genesis 1 creation account. So the important thing here is the last of God's creative activity is Adam and Eve, and then he ceases or rests from his creative work. Next slide. So I'm going to take a look now at Genesis 2, because this is all, now keep this in mind, okay? This is all day 6 activity. Everything I'm going to read to you in Genesis 2, starting with the creation of Adam, all has to take place in day 6. And not just in day 6, the latter part of day 6. Because we know there were some soulless creatures created before Adam in day 6. So what does it say here? God created Adam outside of the garden, and he placed him in the garden. God has Adam tend to the garden. He has an animal naming task that's assigned to Adam. Adam names the livestock, the birds, and the wild animals that God had already created. And this is an important point, because some will say, look at here, it's now describing God, Adam naming these animals that God had created. It doesn't say that God created the animals at this point. All it's saying is he brought to Adam the animals he had already created, and Adam's going to name them. To me, this is a very shallow criticism, of the text, is to say this is a contradiction that God, look at this, God created the animals after he created Adam. It's plain reading in the English. You don't even need to open up a Hebrew lexicon. Plain reading in the English. One thing I forgot to mention earlier, as best I can, and I know I'm not going to be perfect at this, I'm going to try to be open with you all, okay? And I'm going to try to be honest. And, a lot of this stuff, as I said, is going to be radically new for folks. And I want to talk to you how I work through this, because what I'm teaching here is very different than what I first believed as a Christian. Matter of fact, in 1982, I wrote a paper on creation. And I just had a bunch of tracts that were put out by a creationist organization. And I was thrilled because I got a B on the paper. But as I look back now at that content, I would throw everything I wrote out. And I tell you what, my professor was probably an atheist, but to his credit, he did not hold that against me in writing the paper. And I wish I could go back to him. I wish I had this material to present to him back in 1982. And, that was at a fun time in my life when I was struggling to survive college. And it was actually almost 30 years, a little close to 30 years to the date, where I actually got a dismissal notice from UConn when I was going there. And God, through miraculous means, kept me in school. And it was one of the things that led to my faith the next year. So we could talk about that another time. But, this stuff matters, and these criticisms matter. And I think about that professor that I wrote that paper for, and I go, I missed an opportunity. I missed maybe a chance to present some evidence for him that may have at least put a doubt in his mind. Maybe I don't have all the answers to this. So I'm hoping that, where some of you are coming from, this may be radically new. You have a question here? Yeah, her point is, maybe, I don't know that maybe some of those words did stick. You never know. Just yesterday at lunch, I had a chance to sit down with a couple friends at work and plant some seeds. As a matter of fact, one of them asked me, kind of hoping he'd ask me, you have anything going this weekend? Open door. Tough to miss that. Not much. No, I didn't say that. And we had a very good conversation. Very good conversation. Two guys coming from a different worldview and got to share my worldview, biblical worldview. So, and we're going to talk more about that this afternoon. But, these opportunities, they're few and far between very often. And I want to make the most of them. So this is one contradiction that we could lay aside and say this is not a contradiction at all. The animals were created before Adam was created. This is just, God has now given Adam the animal naming task. And during this animal naming task, Adam realizes, hey, there's no one for me here. There's no one quite like me. So God puts him to sleep and performs an operation, and out comes Eve. And his reaction in the Hebrew is hapa'am, at long last. Finally someone for me. Now, if you take the view that the creation days are 6 consecutive 24-hour days, then everything I just described to you from the creation of Adam to the creation of Eve would have had to take place in just a few hours. And I just simply see no way you can make that work within a 24-hour context. Simply no way. As a matter of fact, Gleason Archer, I don't know if any of you have heard of Gleason Archer. If you look in your NIV and your NASB, you'll see him as one of the contributors. He translated, I believe, Daniel in the NIV. And he was the president of Gordon Seminary and corroborated with our founder, Hugh Ross, on a book that dealt with 3 different interpretations of Genesis 1. And well-respected scholars. As a matter of fact, he was considered the dean of Hebrew scholars. He could speak 30 different languages, from what I understand. Took his devotions in a different language every day during the month. John Ankerberg was talking about in a show how he watched him take notes in the Hittite language at his seminar. This is a guy who was really special, and it said people looked up to him. And he, about 30 years ago, there was a Council for Biblical Inerrancy. Many of our doctrinal statements that we have in our church were formed during that period in the 70s and 80s. And there were about 280 Christian leaders, theologians, seminary presidents, all involved in this process. And he was asked if he could write the paper dealing with the issue of the creation days. So he wrote a paper. As a matter of fact, if you get me your email, I can send you a copy of it. But his view ended up being, if you take the text literally, take the Bible literally, it has to be long periods of time. There's no other way you can take it. But then the conclusion also was that we don't want to make this an issue of orthodoxy. It just isn't a significant salvation question. I don't think when we come before God, he's going to say, in order to get in, you have to give me the age of the earth within plus or minus 100,000 years. This is not an important question.